The earliest records of Japanese immigration are in 1869, but in the early 20th century, the population started to boom. With growing Japanese American communities, many anti-Japanese groups started to feel threatened and called for the federal government's actions in turn. The government started to pass laws that discriminated against all people of Japanese descent in the United States. In 1913, they were banned from owning land in California through the California Alien Land Law, and in 1921, a similar law passed in the state of Washington. Washington State House Bill No. 79 heavily regulated the land bought and rented by people of Japanese descent and made it a crime for anyone to sell land or to hold it in trust for Japanese people. By 1924, the Immigration Act nearly halted Japanese immigration until 1952. Throughout World War II, the prevalence of anti-Japanese sentiments continued to affect the lives of Japanese Americans, as many experienced racism, labor exploitation, and restricted freedoms. On December 7, 1941, a cataclysmic event would permanently change the lives of about 120,000 Japanese Americans, as they later experienced a level of discrimination from the U.S. government that had never been seen before. The attack on Pearl Harbor is known as one of the nation's most devastating disasters, with the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service destroying numerous U.S. military vessels, killing 2,390 American soldiers in the process. While Americans felt a devastating sense of loss from the event, many also adopted a newfound wave of fear, specifically towards the Japanese Americans living in the country. Because of the attack involving the Japanese military, people of Japanese descent were seen as a public danger, and suspicions of their disloyalty began to arise. Military officials also began to suspect the possibility of sabotage and espionage from the Japanese Americans living near military bases. Under the increased pressure and demand for action from both the public and military personnel, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066 on February 19, 1942, which allowed the Secretary of War to prescribe military zones in which any or all persons may be excluded. This order applied to virtually all Japanese Americans living in the West Coast, forcing many families to abandon their homes, businesses, and personal belongings in order to move to relocation centers within the span of a few days. While in relocation centers, the lives of Japanese Americans failed to improve, as the conditions of these centers were brutal. Relocation centers, such as the one in Manzanar, offered limited privacy, inadequate protection from intense weather, and included barbed wire fences to prevent people from leaving. After the internment camps of the World War II era were disbanded, it left many Japanese Americans experiencing a sense of loss. This feeling was most prominent amongst the adult generation, due to the oppressiveness of their responsibilities in caring for the younger and older generations of Japanese Americans. This was unfortunately combined with a communal loss of $400 million due to the loss of land and business ownership. Compensating for their newly recognized faults, the U.S. government carried out several actions to help the Japanese American community. In 1942, President Truman honored the 442nd Regiment Combat Team, a U.S. military unit with large Japanese American involvement.
You fought not only the enemy, but you fought prejudice, and you won. Keep up that fight.
Within the same year, several protests led to the repeal of the California's Alien Land Law, which prohibited Japanese American citizens from owning agricultural land for over 3 years, making profit nearly impossible, which had suggested an un-American work drive. Then, 1948 brought a great accomplishment as Truman signed the Japanese American evacuation claims and bestowed $20,000 reparations to each family that had suffered through the internment camps. Continuing on in 1952, the McCarran-Walter Act canceled the 1924 Immigration Act, which allowed migration from Japan to be legalized, later pushing for the eligibility of citizenship for pre-existing generations in America. Life within the camps caused a cultural shift, since many second-generation immigrants weren't able to comfortably practice or participate in familial traditions passed on by their elders, causing many to feel more accustomed to the American culture.